Portfolio. What comes to your mind when you hear this word? This word can mean different things depending on the context. In finance, portfolio is a collection of investments like stocks, bonds, or real estate that someone owns. It's all about managing money to reach financial goals. In creative fields like art, design, or photography, a portfolio is a collection of someone's best work, showing their skills and creativity to potential clients, employers, or anybody for that matter. In project management, portfolio is a group of projects managed together to meet important goals, making sure everything lines up for the company's success. When it comes to careers, portfolio career means working in multiple part time jobs, freelance gigs, contracts, instead of having one full time job. But is this the definition? Probably there is a lot more that we will discover today. It's a way to use different skills, earn from multiple sources, and have a little bit more flexibility than you would typically have. So, whether in finance, creativity, or careers, portfolio is about diversity, managing risks, and achieving specific goals. Good evening, friends. Hello, and welcome to the episode 14 of the Career Shifts podcast. I'm your host, Gopal, and I'm thrilled to have you all here tuning into this episode. For those who have been with us before, you already know this, but for those joining us for the first time, Career Shifts is a podcast where we explore the journeys of people who have successfully navigated significant career transitions. Before we dive into today's episode, as always, I would want to continue our tradition of starting the show with a story. A few months ago, I was on a call with a dear friend and a former colleague, Sophia Christina. We worked together at IIM Ahmedabad and were discussing about our career shifts while discussing how career landscapes have changed in the last 5 years, or probably even more. As we talked about our passions, work ethics, and what makes things different in 2024, Sophia mentioned that she had recently joined a community that focused on portfolio careers, which is being carefully nurtured by our mutual colleague today, Moritz. She asked if I would like to join this community. I didn't hesitate, and I said, sure, why not? After a few exchanges with Moritz, I found myself part of this fascinating community. Today, I'm going to let Moritz tell you all about this community and a lot more about how his own global career shifts led him to appreciate and champion the evolution of portfolio careers. So let's dive in and hear directly from Moritz. Hi, Moritz. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Gopal, for having me.
Wonderful. It's a pleasure to have you. I mean, I know we have been talking about you being the guest on this podcast for a while. It took a bit time, but thank you for making your time to be available on this podcast and share your stories and your perspectives about portfolio careers as well with the audience. So before we start with the regular Q&A, anything that you would like to start sharing with, your thoughts about how are you feeling about being on this podcast?
Well, I just want to say, Gopal, that I'm usually impressed by what you've done so far over the past 13 episodes, and what you're doing is, and I think we'll get into that a bit more later, but what you're doing is such a crucial element of what is happening in this space. And this sort of connection, education, and also sharing is core to the movement that we're seeing. And I'm just impressed at your consistency and the guests that you're having, and I'm really humbled to be here.
Always a pleasure. I think what makes this entire my journey a lot more interesting and I would say also inspirational is the kind of stories that you all have. I mean, each one of my past guests, and I'm sure even in the future, would have enough and more experiences to share, which is what is going to make it more special. And we are going through times where people are really unclear, unsure of what needs to happen and how should they navigate this storm, if I can say. And I think as much as we do, my goal, as I said, I was telling someone the other day, even if 1% of whoever is listening into these episodes, 1% of population does anything different after listening to these episodes, I would feel my job is done. So really, again, thank you for making time for being available on this podcast. I know it's very late in Singapore, so thank you even from that perspective.
No problem.
Moritz, could you start by sharing a bit about your early career? You spent considerable time in India as well, which I got to know when we spoke. And how did it influence the path that you've taken? Anything that you feel is worth sharing to the audience that's listening in?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think we all have a foundation in our early career, and if we're lucky, it's a good one, right? And I feel I was very lucky of having for me, what I found was a very good foundation in the agency business. In my first 12, 13 years of my career, quite consistently with different communications, PR, marketing, and corporate affairs agencies, and all within the same group for those 12 years. And why do I say that this was foundational for me? And I'm very grateful for it, because I think there's a lot of things I learned that help me till today, right? They last until today, and it'll give you an idea also that while I'm a big believer in portfolio careers, I think full-time employment also definitely has a role to play. It's not everyone can and should be a freelancer sort of message, right? It is just
Sure.
that the careers are breaking open a bit more, and new models are emerging, which is interesting and more fulfilling for people at certain points in their life and points in their career, right? But back to the foundation, right? The reason why this agency business served me so well, I think, is firstly because it's all about people. It's a people business, right? Your entire your service you build people hours, basically, and that's the resource, and that means you need to be getting good at that business, means being good with people, generally, and internally, but also externally, because your clients are also people. All day long you're dealing with clients, right? Every minute of the day almost. And that was, I think, a really, really good foundation for me in the early years. And in later years, when you're working in that business, it's all about sales. The more senior you get, it's about sales, which again I didn't see myself as a salesperson, I think, in my early career years, but I became one, and I learned to be one, and I think that was very, very beneficial for me later on. I think you mentioned already, I got to spend half of that time in India. So I was in Mumbai for 6 years, and I have to say it was some of the best times of my life. I love India, and I loved spending my early career there, especially. I have to say it also set the bar really high for the rest of my career, because I had amazing colleagues, teams, amazing bosses that I learned so much from.
Okay, it seems that we have just lost the connection. We'll wait for Moritz to come back. In the meanwhile, I know quite a few people are joining in, listening into the podcast. Feel free to share your questions, thoughts, comments as you see. And there we have Moritz back from
I'm
his
back.
mobile.
Can you hear me?
We have two Moritzes now.
Now we have two. Okay. Is that a good thing? I don't know.
Yeah,
Sorry, internet
it's good
problem.
now.
All good.
Well, that's
All
okay.
good. No worries.
Happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we were talking about my India experience.
You're talking about India and the colleagues that you had in India, and
so it set the stage for my expectations for future. And of course, I had a great time after that with also amazing colleagues and bosses, etc. Later in Vietnam, but generally, it set kind of a very high standard for what I would expect from a work environment in it, and that dynamic, incredibly friendly, and also at the same time very ambitious market was just I think, amazing starting point for me. Yeah. I have to say.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, at some point of time in your career, you took the leap towards entrepreneurship, and that's a significant shift. And you also mentioned that something around sales where it was not something that you had planned for, and it. I mean, in times like these, I've heard a lot of people say this. That I mean, I would like to do many other things, but selling is very difficult for me. So I don't think I have aspirations to sell. I mean, I want to do business. I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know how to go about selling. So how did that all, basically come together? What were some of those thoughts, feelings that you went through when you took that plunge?
Yes, that was I think, a pivotal point, because like many people, at some point in that relatively corporate path, I've felt dissatisfied, and I will have to say it had nothing to do with the company. It had something to do with I believe in the seasons of your life.
Correct.
There's a season for everything. I think I got this from Sarah Wong, one of our members of our community. She talks about that on her podcast, right? Seasons. There's a season for everything. That season was just ending, and I noticed it because I felt incredibly boxed in. I was working long hours, long days, but it felt less satisfying than ever. Previously, I'd worked long hours and long days, and it felt energizing. And when that's not there anymore, you're in a rut, right? And so entrepreneurship is something that came to me then. Yeah, it was almost serendipitous. I found an excellent business partner, and we decided to work together. As an entrepreneur, your sales is everything, right? It's always founder-led. I do have a tendency, though, still till today, when I see something that I find a weakness in my own toolkit, it bothers me, and I tend to jump straight in and say, I have to get good at this, even if it's not always comfortable. And so I jumped into entrepreneurship, and the experience really, that transition was stark. That transition was really stark. I think you can almost it's positives and negatives together. It's like a mixed emotions at every step of the way, right? On the one hand, and this is, I would say at first, it's a positive. Anything is possible. You can do whatever you would like. But that is also a burden, right? Because you have this sea of options. What do you do now? What do you choose? What do you decide to go for? Because there's nothing more important than focus when you're trying to by yourself to build something, right? This was back in 2018, and I had this sea of options suddenly. Yeah, so it's
when things were really good.
Sorry?
When things were still really good.
When things were still really good, yeah. Exactly. And there's another I felt this incredibly strongly, this loss of the brand. When you step out of the big company you used to work for, that everybody recognizes, at least in your field, right? You don't have that business card anymore, and you're just quote unquote Moritz, right? You're like, hi, here I am. And it is and this one, though, I felt it very negatively at first, because I felt a lack of confidence due to that. But then that one very quickly turned into a positive, because I realized, as I was meeting people, the conversation was not boxed in. Whereas when I met people with my business card, the conversation would be almost from the get-go would be, this is what we're going to talk about, because this is what you do, this is what I do, right? When you're on your own, and your brand, even though you might have a company and a brand, it doesn't have that value yet, or that meaning for people yet. They look at you, and you have a much more broader conversation, and that means there are more opportunities that you can actually find to connect to each other. And this happens to me daily now, almost, because we talk about not just one thing, but 5 or 10 things, and you find that you have things that you could do together, maybe not related to the first thing that you met for, which is fantastic. So it actually opens up opportunities. So it's a negative that turned into I felt it as a negative turned into a positive, right?
Yeah. No, great. I think we are some of our experiences at the end of the day, as we all say, right? And I think there is enough and more that we get to learn. We were just discussing this before the podcast started. I think it's the thing that it boils down to is how open you are to learn from all that you're going through in your life, in your career. And sometimes it's hard. It's very hard, and it takes a lot of courage to accept and acknowledge that you're good at certain things and you're not good at certain things, and working towards making that happen. I think that's going to be a journey for a lot of people as they go through these shifts. At some point of time, you also did go back to be an employee. How did that happen? And any key lessons that you took away from the period of when you were an employee, then you became an entrepreneur, and now again back to being an employee.
Yeah,
Anything
it's
that you want to share?
a wave, right? It rides. You ride the wave. I mean,
Yeah.
What I learned, one thing that I learned when I was on my own, also with my business partner and I started working on these flexible business models already back then.
Sure.
So we created a collective called the Fluid Collective, which had 20 senior consultants from all over the world come together to work together on projects. You see that there's like a seed being laid there to what I'm doing today, right? Like it started there actually. And then I took on a role, actually a fractional leadership role with a startup, which was not called fractional back then. It was just, I will do the full remit, but I will only be able to do it on 2 days a week, basically, and we will have a consulting contract. Yeah. And so that's how I started experiencing that part. The move back into full employment, which many people do, was just too big an opportunity to turn away. And I'm saying this primarily from the perspective of learning again. It was a pure business development role with marketing in it and so on. But for a startup, it's all growth and sales, B2B sales, right? And so I was very confident by then in what I'd learned over the last 5-6 years in big business development, B2B business development. And so I wanted to build on that, basically. But what I think the big thing for me that had changed when I went back into full employment was that I recognized this power of transferable skills, because the industry I went into was totally new to me. It was healthcare, digital health, actually, and it's a lot I could carry over actually from the work that I'd done before. And I'd say this to a lot of people who go into fractional work, to say, don't look at your old CV, please, because the traditional CV, you look at titles and companies, right? And that's quite misleading, because whether you were a CMO or a sales director at company A or B, you are going to have very, very different skills that you honed in those years, right? And they don't show in your CV. And so this focus on the skills is so important when you go into fractional work, because it's all about what can you solve for us. It's not about what's your last title or what do you want to call your job with us. It's about what problem can you solve? What can you achieve for us? And when you take that into the full-time employment, you look at your full-time role totally differently, because you look at it through the same lens. What can I solve here? What can I achieve here? Not how can I fill out this title, right? And so that had changed completely for me when I walked into that role. And it just kind of evolved from there. But that's kind of the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together towards like this community where we are today and what we're building today. It's quite amazing. And it takes years, it's not something that happens overnight. Like I picked up one puzzle piece here, one puzzle piece there. I have a very good friend and former colleague who built an entire liquid marketing agency out of Canada. He has a few hundred people now. They are all freelancers, from designers and he brings them together in purpose-led teams, basically, against specific projects. You start seeing these models and you start thinking about what could be possible. And this is where it kind of started to make sense for me to get to bring it together into something a little bit more bigger and more focused. Yeah.
Sure. I just had a follow-up question on one thing that you just said. I think it's a very interesting point that you're sharing, where, when you are moving from a full-time employment to let's say, independent consulting or fractional roles, you focus quite a lot on what problem you can solve, which is something a lot of people struggle with when they are in their initial years of, or maybe few weeks after having taken this decision to go solo and do something for themselves on their own. But at the same time, when you do a reverse flip, it becomes a challenge again, where you now have to fit yourself back into a full-time organizational role where you're still looking at it from a very perspective of, what problem am I going to solve here? What kind of steps or advice or tips that you would like to give to the audience on how should they look at these two differently? Anything that you have as a personal reflection?
Yeah, I mean, I would say most importantly that if you take on a full-time employment, a full-time job again, which any of us can do at any point in time, pick the right company, right? The one that appreciates your entrepreneurial thinking, the things that, and most of the times this is how it happens, is because people see that in the interview, that you suddenly interview completely differently than you would have like 5 or 6 years ago, because you're approaching problems, challenges, questions differently, right? So if it's a match, I think it can be very, very good for both sides because it's a match, but it means pick the right company. And I think everyone should do that ideally, because there are reasons why you left full employment also, right? And yeah, it has to be a match. Some companies really, really appreciate the people that focus on their work differently, as if they're running their own business, right? And those are the companies that you should maybe then try to connect with. But often I think it happens just, by happenstance. Yeah.
Wonderful. Let's shift gears to portfolio careers. So I know for a fact that, you and I, when we spoke for the first time, you mentioned how the entire concept of portfolio careers came by, and the book that I had written also about the portfolio life. Do you want to quickly share about, what, firstly, wonderful community that you have nurtured. And I think kudos to each and every individual that we have on the team. Such a vibrant, community, exchange of thoughts, completely selfless. The engagement is top notch. And I think that's one thing a lot of communities struggle. It's very hard to keep the community engaged. And a lot of credit goes to you to be able to make that happen on a relentless basis, if I can say that. But what triggered that, if I can ask you, like what triggered the thought of putting together a community? What kind of goals did you have or thoughts did you have when you were deciding on putting these communities together? And what were first few members who joined the community look like? And what kind of conversations did you have about that?
Yes, now I really come to my favorite part of this conversation. I want to first talk about briefly about what you first mentioned, which is the quality of conversations and of engagement, interaction. Right, I am blown away by it every day, and this is all the members. Right, we have.
Yeah.
I think we're lucky to have an incredibly high caliber of senior professionals across Asia, now 550, I think it is now.
Wow.
Yes, we have all met very, very high caliber people all our lives. But what amazes me and what I love every day is the openness. It's this mindset of sharing, and we for example, we have this toolkit series, right? We just had our fifth session today. It's basically like a curriculum about the foundational pieces of how to be a fractional leader, and we have expert panels with people who are a few years ahead of others in this space, and these quite successful fractional leaders are very happy to open up their tricks of the trade, their tips, their processes. How do I do X, Y, and Z? What is my secret to building business, etc., to everyone who's on those calls, right? So that is I think an incredible and rare thing to get. And similarly, and I mean, with the responsiveness, just everybody's happy to contribute and share. People throw questions in and get like 10, 15 responses. Not uncommon, right? And a lot more privately also. I know people tell me. So yeah, I'm super grateful, and I think there's lots of ways to go still. But yeah, to the beginning, I mean, I met quite a few people here who were on this track or thinking about it, and that's all it took, because most of the people that I met said, I don't know if I'm the only one who feels like this or who wants to do this or who's exploring this. And I said, no, you're not. I meet someone every week. So why don't we get together, right? Like, this is as simple as that, really. It was just like, let's get together. And we got together with 30 people. That was a year ago. So it took a year, right? And yeah, it's been amazing. It's different from running a business. I think it's much more organic in many ways. You do have to have like a sort of vision, like what do you want to achieve, and you have to communicate that very clearly. And but in the day-to-day and in the operational and in the things that you do, you cannot force anything. It's all, you have to listen a lot. I think you have to listen, feel the pulse of the community. You can't say yes to everything, because you have to have the everyone in mind always, right? Also the silent majority. I always have the feeling I have to look at people who might not speak up, but I know them, and it's a lot of intuitive stuff, right? It's not very tangible, and I do get things wrong. I mean, I have rolled decisions back and whatnot, and this will continue to happen, right? But in general, I think you just have to kind of go with your gut, and it's different from a business. It's much more. I feel it's much more amorphous almost. It's organic, right? But it's fun and amazing, and when I see these interactions, it's an amazing reward for me, right? Yeah. The reason, I mean, why is this important? Why do I talk about this also so passionately? Is because I think there's we're really at the beginning, or maybe already in the middle of a really important movement in the region, in many markets in the region, and what happens is when people start getting interested in doing something different in this direction, the first thing they often realize is that they need to meet new people, because they're so well networked in their own industry and related to what they need for their job, but that network will not take them to the next step, right? And so I need a network. I need support. I need to learn. I need to find people to do something with, to collaborate with, maybe. And we've kind of become an environment in portfolio careers in Asia. And I want to say we're not the only ones. There's other amazing communities out there that are also doing this, right? But this is where it bubbles up, because people see they can get that there, right? They can make new colleagues, friends, collaborators, business partners, etc. And it's fun. Yeah, that's really why this is so important to me, because it's all part of this. I don't think the movement can survive without network and community, right? And so that's where we're at today. Yeah,
sure. I think one of the conversations that we had when we were talking a few months ago was, the relevance of what portfolio career is. For someone who is listening in and probably has not had the opportunity to understand this as much as probably you and I have, do you want to break down what portfolio careers means? Number one. Number two, what does this community do? Like you said, a few things about exchanging knowledge, you do some toolkit series, etc. And number three, if there are people who would want to be part of this community, how does that work? If you can speak about a bit on that.
Yes, happy to. So I'll start from the beginning. A portfolio career, a lot of what we're talking about here is very new. And so semantics are still somewhat fuzzy at the edges, right? Which is okay. Like, we all live in a little bit of an ambiguous environment where we're all actually not just comfortable but excited by it, but it means also definitions are not 100% nailed down, right? I'll tell you from what I think it means. I'm not the authority on it, but I'll just tell you why I named the community this, is because I saw what did I see? I saw that there are a lot of people second half of their career, right? I'm talking about people who have gone through the foundation of their career, have had successes, have had leadership positions, and are now feeling somewhat unfulfilled, bored, maybe even curious about other things. They feel they spend their whole week on one thing, but there are other things they would like to do, but they don't have the time, and it just makes them feel uneasy, right? And so they take on mentorships, they take on advisory roles, they join boards, maybe they do more charity. One of our members said to me, he started mentoring startups once a month, and he says that's the most fun I have all month. Yeah, even though he likes the job and he's good at it, but he says this is fun. I have a sort of different feeling about that, right? The second reason is they want flexibility, and this is probably a post-COVID development, and younger generations are much more vocal about it. But right. Even this generation and those who are in management positions want flexibility. That's the second big driver. They don't want to need to go to an office 5 days a week, right? And have set working hours, etc. They want to have more flexibility. And there's a big driver that's kind of a subset of that, which is women after having kids wanting to continue their high-flying career, but on their own terms. That's a big driver of this as well. And you see that everywhere, but you also see it in our community, right? And so if you look at these drivers, then what's happening? They're looking at new career models. How can I make this work now? This is the question, right? And so the portfolio career basically is able to be the umbrella for all of this. It does not mean consulting or fractional or whatnot. It means you're doing more than one thing, basically. The term originates from the US. There's an excellent book by Christina Wallace, The Portfolio Life, which I think I recommended also, Gopal. It kind of was the tipping point for me a year ago, reading that book. And in the US, I think the focus is already more on de-risking your career, right? It's about like the way that you have a stock portfolio so that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You have a career portfolio so you don't put all your eggs in one basket. If something drops out, or if maybe you lose your job or something, you have something else already going. I think, and this is again only my view. I'm happy to be told otherwise by other people. But I think in Asia it's more about the curiosity than about the de-risking, because I think most people are still quite optimistic about the future. And it's more on the doing only one thing does not fulfill me. I also want to write that book, and I also want to I want to work with startups, for example. So I want to do 2 or 3 or things that might be connected or might not be connected. So with some people, they are all kind of working together and also towards each other. For example, you're a consultant who has a book on the topic that you're consulting on. Or for some people, they're totally different things. So they're a consultant, but they're also an angel investor, and they also run a podcast series on a passion topic of theirs, right? Okay. And they kind of see where each of these streams takes them, and they get pleasure out of all of them and satisfaction and meet people through all of them. But most importantly, it opens up different potential futures for them. And this is, I think, the real magic behind this school. Like you hone new skills through each of these, you meet new people, and you therefore open up possibilities, at the end of the day.
Sure. I think the last question, which also happens to be one that Ajay has asked on that particular one, is how do one join the community?
Yes. So we have only 2 requirements in the community. Is it requires a certain seniority. So we generally say rule of thumb is between 10 and 15 years of work experience, at least, and working in or with Asia. That's the only 2 requirements. Everyone else is welcome. And the way to get in is through LinkedIn. So there's a group on LinkedIn called Portfolio Careers in Asia. You have to look at the closed group because we also have an open page. But at that closed group, you can just apply. And if you meet those criteria, then you're absolutely welcome to join, and you will be able to enjoy all the things that we do. Yeah.
Wonderful. Moritz, on that one point that you made about how it evolved in the US and how it's happening in Asia as well. One of my previous podcast guests had a very different contrarian view about portfolio careers, more from a perspective of, are we trying to spread ourselves too thin when it comes to being focused about being true to one career path? Often something that is considered as, I mean, in the time that we live in, where focus is of utmost importance. What are your views, probably? I mean, are there tips or are there best practices that you have seen out of our own community where people are able to do this well? I mean, is there a response to the focus challenge that people have highlighted about this?
That's an excellent question. Look, I think in the end, while most people who are reaching this point have a decent financial foundation, which also allows them to experiment a bit, right?
Yeah.
But everyone still wants to also make money. And so as someone who has run businesses for a large part of my life, I believe also the customer will guide you to some extent, right? The customer will focus you in the end, right? You can include elements in your portfolio that are not meant to make money. That's also fine, by the way. I mentioned, I think, maybe you write a book just for fun. You're not trying to make money, or or you have a charity, or you decide to start a community like I have, right? Like or a club for model airplanes, or right. But the focus on let's say on the things that are meant to in the end also be financially rewarding, in part comes, I think, from the customer. It does focus you on what's your priority right now. And it is unfortunately also one of the reasons why some people say, I got to give this up and take a full-time job again, right? Because it didn't work out. It takes some time to find your focus and find something and find your customers and find the connect. But I would also say that we all have a million ideas, right? And I've experienced this myself. In the end, forget the fees for a second, or the revenue part. You know what gets traction and what doesn't. And I say with most people, I mean, some people are amazing and they have 10 ideas and all of them get traction. But to be honest, most of us, we have 10 ideas and you will immediately say these two fire fastest, right? And when they fire, you get rewarded because you say, wow, there's feedback coming. I'm not sitting in my own chamber, right, talking about portfolio careers and nobody's listening, but actually people are want to join, want to have meetings, etc. We have podcasts, etc. Amazing, right? So you go with the stuff that is talking back to you in many ways, I think. And I think that's actually, and maybe I should, it's not that relevant actually whether it's related to money or not. Maybe it's just relevant to what is talking back at you, right? Where you get a response, and that will focus you, because that response will take you further fast, and you just naturally go with that, because that's where you get a different sort of reward at that point. You feel success, right? And that's, I think. And now there are some, of course, like some people just if you're driven by passion, that can take a lot of time, but you will just be persistent until you get that sort of that can also be a focus. Your passion can be incredible focus, right? If you feel
absolutely,
I really want to be a crime book author, then you will write 10 crime books until one becomes a bestseller, and you will just stick through it, right? That's the consistency part. So I think I'm just giving two examples. I think maybe some people have a hard time and don't find it, but I think these are two good ways I think I've seen people find focus.
Sure. There's a question that has come in from Kathy or Catherine Perry. Is there a similar group in the US?
I wouldn't know, honestly, if it's similar to. There are lots of groups around. I don't know if there's a similar group to this one, because I'm not in any of the other ones. So hard for me, Catherine.
Maybe we can create one.
Maybe we can create one, or we extend it, right? There are some elements of portfolio careers, and you must have heard of the term fractional by now.
Yes.
If not, it means basically that you're kind of a hands-on. You're taking a fractional role in an organization. You're a fractional CMO or fractional CFO, means you work 1 day a week but take on the remit of finance for a startup, for example, with all your experience. That field has a lot of communities also in the US, also in quite a few coming up also in Australia. So there are lots, but that's a very specific part of a portfolio career, right? And I think to your question earlier, Gopal, why portfolio careers? I think there's a much bigger umbrella for this movement, and because I'm going with the motivations, fractionals is one very exciting and interesting part of it, and it's really creating a lot of buzz, I think, in the region. But this much broader portfolio careers bit, I have not seen in other community, but also I probably haven't come across it. I'm sure something like this exists somewhere. We'd have to find it.
Yeah, and as I said, if there is enough and more, demand for this, happy to, support global people also to join in. Absolutely. So
Gopal, I just want to say we have a lot of, so we're getting into the second year now, right? And we're doing a lot more collaboration with other communities. This is kind of part of how the focus is. I wouldn't say it's shifting. We're still very much a community, but we're also collaborating with others. I think if it's the right connect, we can get a lot of good stuff out of that too. Also collaborating across geographies with others, and this is kind of definitely my intention also to see how we can all create more benefit like that. So I'm super open to this. Yeah, we are very open bunch of people, as you know, Gopal.
Absolutely. I think one of the first things that I'm very keen is to have the India chapter. If I can kick that off, if I can say that, we should probably work towards that at some point of time, because there is definitely a lot of need for guidance, mentorship, best practices sharing, and we have, of course, a lot of stories to share as well. So if there is any way that we can make that happen, not to say that we don't have people from India in that community, but definitely it would be good for some bit of physical presence as well, which some of you enjoy and we envy. Which don't get to be part of, but I think that's one thing that I would definitely.
We've kind of never acquired proactively. We've never had a member acquisition drive, or I've never put LinkedIn ads out there. Nothing like that. Because honestly, I wanted people's motivation to drive them to us rather than me inviting a bunch of people and then they're asking me what they're doing there, right? Like, to put it a bit more extreme. So it's good, because what happened then is that it's all referrals right now, right? It's referrals and people finding us through LinkedIn posts, and we get really, really good growth of membership through that. But I've never cared about the numbers, because the quality is much more important to me. The quality of conversations, of engagement, and to grow all the good stuff that we were talking about, right? And so because of this, we have a very interesting membership makeup strategy. Because of course Singapore, we're quite big in Singapore. We have 350 members now, partly because my network is here, partly because the fractional movement has really taken off in Singapore. So there's lots and lots of events happening here, I think Singapore in many ways is embracing these new career models on the business side also early on, and so that's giving us a lot of boost, I think. But then we also have almost 100 members in Taiwan, which happened because one of our very, very early members, Alan McIver, invited people from his network and said, hey, are you interested? Just put out a post on LinkedIn, and we got 50 members, and then we had a meetup. And so it is organic, right? And the same can happen anywhere else. It's just that this is a hobby of mine, and so I can spend only so much time on it, and I cannot proactively go and develop member base. I don't want to also, because I think this organic growth is the best. It is honestly the best. But if it happens, I promise you, Gopal, I'm coming over to India. And I would so look forward to that. I think the big challenge in India is if we do have a meetup geographically, where do we go, right? Or we do a roadshow, do the portfolio roadshow in India. But
we probably would have people saying Mumbai, Gurgaon, Bangalore, Hyderabad, and yeah, and then you will be spoiled for choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Uh, you touched upon this slightly earlier on, but I wanted to really take a moment to dig deeper into this. There you go. Let's do the same in India, says Arti, which is great. But coming back to the question that I had was, you know, you might have learned a lot in the last 1 year, not just about the portfolio careers per se, but also from people journeys. Are there any, really good examples, success stories that you want to share about, how people have ended up benefiting from each other's presence, network, and what could probably be some of the um, advices for communities to, look up to this as an example? Because I've been part of a lot of communities, and I am part of a lot of communities. One of the struggles is to maintain that, openness and, the whole willingness to help each other. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. So
Yeah.
what kind of examples do you have that you want to, share as part of this last 1 year's journey with portfolio careers?
On this openness and willingness to help, I've thought a lot about this, and I'm going to say something that, and again, I cannot say, I'm just sharing what my thinking is, right? But I actually, I don't think this is to my credit or the credit of the community. I kind of think it has to do with people stepping out into something new, and and therefore realizing that we are all learning. This is a theme that keeps coming up in the community. Like, we're all learning. So even the people who are, for example, I mentioned the toolkit session where we have a very focused, almost like a class, like a master class on sales and business development, right? And the people who are leading that have been doing this successfully for 5, 6, 7 years, way longer than most of us, right? But they are the most humble people in the room. They're the ones who say, I'm still learning. I can just share what I have learned, but I want to know from all of you how you're doing this, because I'm also still learning. So I think this is the foundation for this humility and this openness and this camaraderie to some extent, to say, hey, we're kind of all on the same journey, some a little bit ahead, some a little bit just getting started, but here we are, right? And so, yeah. And yeah, I think this is my thinking when I think about this. The success, I think, well, honestly, my big learning is you do what people want, right? Do what people want and need. From day one, it has been, I thought being in Singapore, where you can go to a different event and dial into a different webinar every day, every hour of the day, there's a webinar happening. And yet everybody wants to connect. It's connections. And we do have a WhatsApp chat. Until 2 months ago, that WhatsApp chat was pretty quiet. There was very little engagement. Sometimes someone would ask a question, then it would be quiet for 3 days, and I would make an announcement again. But from day one, the connections, whether it's on calls or mentorships or in-person meetings, the more we do, the more people enjoy, and people say, let's do more. We need more topics. We want to have more interaction. And so you do that. This is the biggest learning. When this is a signal, this is a green flag to say, this is what obviously is adding value, then we do more of it, right? And I think the other thing I want to say is I know how hard it is to go out and network.
Yeah.
Not everybody is a networker, and I try to also have formats that are kind of networking for people who are not so comfortable with networking. Right? So for example, on our monthly meetups, we have this. We have 30 people dialing in, or 20 people sometimes, or sometimes 15 people. But we don't do a big group chat. We get in 2 rooms, right? We have speed networking. Sometimes 2 people, sometimes 3 people. Very, very good for new members who want to just make a first connection, right? And everyone freezes a bit, says, oh, we're going to do afterwards. Everyone loves it, right? Like, and unless maybe, I don't know, maybe not everyone, but I get tremendous positive feedback afterwards. We always do a second round, right? So I think that's I think it's important that you don't only build a community for people who are very comfortable with crowds, because many people are not, right? That's and I know
Majority are not.
Majority are not, and it's it's sometimes daunting, right? The other thing is, somewhere we do panels, as I mentioned, the toolkit. We also have a sounding board format, where this is always organic. So usually someone in the community puts up their hand and says, hey, I'm really interested in this topic. Independent board, non-executive board members. How do you become a non-executive, or new AI solutions, and when five more people say yes, oh, me too, then we just say, okay, let's do a sounding board. We get together. We have a few people who can share something about the topic, and then we have a discussion, right? But then the in-person meetings are completely just, we get together and we chat, and there's no agenda at all. And I also learned this, and this is also something someone said from the beginning, saying, please, no panels. When we meet in person, I do panels, of course. There's a role for all of this, right? But there's also the role for the unstructured, meet each other and just say, oh, wow, I've only seen you on video calls. Amazing to see you in person. Let's chat about our life and where you're from and where I'm from and what drives us. And there's a tremendous value in that. And some of the best completely unrelated networking events that I go to are like that. And I've learned from them. I've learned about that. That's an amazing thing to happen, right? Like, so cool. So yeah. And then so success stories, right? I think for me, everything that happens that helps people go further, fantastic. I think we're doing our bit together to make this more normal as a career path. But there's a second element to all this, which is employers, right? Hiring managers, those who actually would work with consultants, advisors, fractional leaders, etc. And it's incredible how you see how difficult it is for everyone to make that connect, right? Like, especially if you don't come from a business development background, but even if you do, doing business development for yourself versus for
others, it's very hard, very different.
Very difficult, very different, right? And so what I'm really, really happy about actually is that we now have a number of projects, ventures, collectives, different formats that are part of the community, benefiting from the community, or sometimes recruiting for projects in the community, collaborating for marketing initiatives within the community, collaborating for other connections within the community. And I think that makes a big difference, because that's actually where you create connection to the business world, right? That's kind of the creating these avenues, these channels towards work. How do you do projects together, whether it's whatever the format is, a consulting agency or whatnot, right? People actually doing work together and finding ways to do work together. And for me, this is a big, I think we need to do more of that. I think we need to encourage that more. I think we can be a great community, but if we are also able to become like a fertile ground for an ecosystem,
correct?
To actually bring it together and have others come to us that are not only talent, but also find ways to just be a connector within this entire newly growing space. This is what we should support, because that's really where, if we have the potential to do that, we can create so much value, I think.
Absolutely. So any potential future recruiters, if you need to hire anybody, you know who to reach out to.
I'm not a recruiter, by the way, and I don't want to be. Also, I don't want to be. I think, but I think, and most of the people that are in the community are not interested also in full-time roles, right? But, but I would say anyone who is building interesting models in this space, we are very, very open to see how we can all benefit from each other. This is kind of what it is. There is no set path of like, here's a portal and log in and find a collaborator or whatnot. No, you still have to do the work, right? But we make it easy. for each other, I think, within the community to find the right connections. You've seen this, Gopal, it's
Yes,
if you're
absolutely.
looking for someone or something, someone always either 1 degree or 2
Has an
degrees
answer.
has an answer, right? Like, and this is so valuable when you're in a space that is today so fragmented, completely fragmented, undefined, and we are trying to get it organized a little bit, at least, right? We're trying to find a way to make it a bit easier for people. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a reflection on this, which I would like to share, and this may be a thought that probably needs to be discussed a little bit more. I'm part of a lot of communities, mainly on WhatsApp, where they turn off conversations because they feel that muted, and because they feel that it will just be too much to manage. While I appreciate the intent with which that is being done, because a lot of people then complain that there is too much of conversation that gets done. If you really put a good focus and approach on, you're bringing people together and calling them a community because you want to engage as a community. And if you're not allowing communication to happen, then it's not going to help. This community is a great example of how, you can have problem statements discussed, the most vulnerable thoughts being openly shared, and find solutions through that. And I think for that to happen, you need to have a slightly more open approach to allow conversations to happen. And I think kudos to all of you who have been able to do that. So a large part of credit goes to you, Moritz. So thank you for that.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Let's quickly shift gears in the interest of time, taking on a bit of rapid question so that people get to know more about you. So the first one, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay.
Too much coffee, yes.
Too much coffee. Favorite way to unwind after a long day?
With my family. With my family, and I tell you why also, because I think so I have a daughter, and having children gives you a perspective that is so, nothing is as important as as this little person that I get to raise. And while I feel as you can see, very passionate about my work, and probably more passionate than I think I ever have felt about my work, but still, raising my daughter is the most important job of my life, and everything else just kind of pales. And that is very, very good for not taking yourself or things too seriously, I think. And that's one of many things that she has taught me. And so, not a short answer, but yes, that's why it's the best. It's the best for me to spend time with my family after a long day.
Absolutely. Kids change a lot in our lives and give, as you rightly said, new dimension, bring in a lot of empathy in life and careers as well. So completely agree with you on that. One hobby you wish you had more time for?
Learning a new language.
Okay.
Until I started working, I always learned the language of where I lived, and then it got more, I still tried, but it got more and more difficult. This is part of the portfolio thing. And so thankfully, since I am back on the portfolio track, but now I'm also, anyway, I'm trying to, but it's the one thing, honestly, it's one of my favorite things to do. I think it challenges you at a totally different level.
Lovely. Did you learn Hindi?
I was in Mumbai, and it was a bit difficult because in Mumbai, at work and everywhere, it's English or Hinglish, right?
English,
I actually learned, not to share now, but I learned a bit more Maharashtrian even in Marathi than I learned Hindi. But no, I think if I'd been in Delhi, I definitely would have, because it's much more
picked up. Yeah, true.
Yeah, would have picked up. But in Mumbai, it was just I was not able to do it organically, and so then it's difficult.
Sure. If you weren't in your current profession, what would you be doing?
I would be making movies. Yeah, I was in theater club in high school, and I love independent cinema, especially in Asia. And there's such an amazing film scene here. And if I could, I would spend just a lot more time finding ways to immerse myself and make my own films.
Lovely. Hoping to see that one day on Netflix. What's the most adventurous thing that you have done ever?
I don't know which one I should share now. Since you're on the topic, I think I moved to India on a one-way plane ticket without ever having visited before, with the intention to ideally make a new life there. And I did. And it actually was the best decision of my life. But I think it's probably one of the most adventurous things I've done. Yeah. Of several, though, I've done. Like I like to push myself. So yeah.
Great. Any movie that you can't stop recommending?
Tons. I watched so many. Most recently, I don't know if most recently there was a amazing South Korean film, Decision to Leave. If anyone gets a hand on that, that's a fantastic film. Also from Cannes, Anatomy of a Fall, French, I think, movie by Justine Triet. Watched it on the plane just 3 weeks ago, and it hasn't left me alone since then. Yeah, I think that's the two most recent ones. Yeah, but lots of films. I'm a huge Wong Kar-wai fan. The Hong Kong cinema, Taiwan independent cinema, fantastic movies out there.
Lovely. And the last one, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Right now, it changes. I move a lot, but right now, Singapore. I think Singapore. It's a great place. I'm in the middle of the jungle, the greenery, and I get to take my bicycle all over the island. So yeah, Singapore. I think second favorite, probably Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, which I loved when I lived there also. They have a really nice combination between work, fun.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Moritz, for joining us today. Before we wrap up, do you have any final advice, thoughts for our listeners?
I can't believe we're already done. That's so fast. I just want to say, firstly, thank you, Gopal. Amazing. Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing your part, because I think this no one can do anything alone in this space, and no one can. We're all still relying very much on creating awareness together. I would say to anyone, just start from where you are, and if you're interested, come join us, and otherwise just watch it. But the space is evolving so fast. I think looking down the road 6 months, 12 months, I think it's going to be a very different landscape, and I think it's going to move. So I think exciting times for new career paths in the region, and I'm so happy to be able to play a role in it. It's fun. Would you say?
Wonderful. I agree. Completely agree. I think portfolio careers, maybe as a term, may be something new, but the ways of working, I think, as you rightly pointed out, people are curious. People want to know more things, do more things, newer things. And I always believe in this one thing that I have realized in the last maybe a year or so: don't compete, collaborate. And I think that's going to be the mantra that is going to make us all, go forward and be winners as team than winners alone as an individual. So completely with you on that. And I wish and hope that we as a community that I'm part of, yes, are able to grow more and more, and are able to contribute to a lot more of people in their success. And looking forward to that part more and more. So again, thank you for joining us today. And to all of you who joined in today or will catch up on this episode, either through the YouTube channel or Spotify or any other place that you would listen in. I hope Moritz's unique career journey and our conversation about portfolio careers have given you fresh perspectives on how to navigate your own career transitions. As Moritz shared, the concept of portfolio careers is not about having multiple roles. It's about creating a career that aligns with diverse skills, passions, and flexibility you desire. It's a powerful way to stay adaptable in today's rapidly changing job market while exploring new opportunities. We are in an era where traditional career paths are being redefined, challenged in many cases, and as Moritz and many of our previous guests guests have highlighted, embracing these shifts with confidence and clarity is key to thriving. I look forward to bringing you more inspiring stories and practical insights in future episodes. Until then, stay curious, stay flexible, keep tuning in to Career Shifts podcast on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. See you all soon. Keep shifting forward and upward. Thank you so much.